within the world of systems thinking, ladies and gents, systems are purpose and value driven. Basically, it means that the scholars in your school, as a system, have a purpose of their own, and they have value sets of their own. What we also need to remember is that the teachers have a value system of their own. But we also need to remember, if we have a look at the teachers, is that the teacher within the financial environment, for example, presenting accountancy, accounting teachers have a different value set and a worldview, for example, than the teacher who does history, for example, or philosophy, or language. And we need to understand that, because there will be differences in opinion. And what we also need to understand is that if we need to deal with them and work with them, we need to understand that person's value system. This is more or less what we refer to as the spatial aspects of a system. There's a lot more detail, but I think for us understanding the systems thinking for today's purpose, that's more or less sufficient. What we also need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is that systems have a temporal dimension, meaning a time dimension. When we need to understand that there's a past, there's a present, and that there's a future. And we need to understand the trends of the past to understand the present. We need to understand the present to look for discontinuities into the future. And if we need to plan for the future, we need to take into consideration what have been the trends that have formed the present and what we can expect in the form of discontinuities into the future. And the point of departure is also one where we say we don't want to continue what the past has given us. Let's put it this way, if you want to plan for the future, we want to create our future, create our own ideal future, which is something that is ideal in the sense that we would always need to strive towards it. We can never get to a point where we say we don't need to work with this anymore because we've done it. The moment we start having that frame set, that frame of mind, then we will fall back. Typically looking at a culture. Culture with a sound value system is never something that you don't need to work at anymore. It's always something that you need to work towards every single day. If you need to create a value, one of the values is one of respect, you can never say we don't need to work at respect anymore. If it's about trust, you can never say we don't need to work at trust anymore. The moment we start doing that, we start falling back. We don't stand still. Ladies and gents, I would now like to introduce to you the different dimensions of a system. When you look at your school, when you look at the society within which the school is situated, you need to understand that they're all multidimensional. And in order for you to understand exactly what your school is about, you need to understand these dimensions. And the first dimension that I would like to introduce to you is the ecological dimension. Now, the ecology, as we know, is about fauna, flora, water, the air that we breathe in. These are all factors that impact upon your system in one way or the other. If you're a mining organization, you can think for yourself that, you know, if you pump certain gases into the air, it has an impact. The water that you use, it has an impact on society at large. The next dimension is the biological or the physiological dimension, and the two normally go hand in hand. If you're Sasol Synfuels and you're pumping gases into the air, what impact does that have on the physiology of the people in society? Are our children healthy because of it? Also, if you're in a mining company, ladies and gentlemen, and you're working 3 kilometers below the surface of the earth, what impact does the heat have there? The third dimension I would like to introduce to you is the physical dimension. Yeah, we talk about the infrastructure. What's the footprint that we're looking at? What is the infrastructure that your school has access to? Do you have a well-equipped school, or is your school under a tree somewhere in the veld? And from a natural sphere perspective, these 3 dimensions are important to understand. The fourth dimension falls within the technosphere, and that is the one of technology. And by now we all know that technology is here to stay, and it has changed the world dramatically. Thomas Friedman writes in his book, The World is Flat, about the impact that technology has had on making a global world a small village. He talks about it's been flattened. Access has been granted to everybody. And we also know by now that through technology, our children in our classes frequently have access to more information that we have. So our roles really need to change, moving away from content to facilitating that growth. And if your computer doesn't work properly, do yourself a favor, go and call your 10-year-old son or your daughter. They might come and help you. The third set of dimensions are extremely important when we work with people, and that is the psychosociosphere dimensions. And the first dimension there that we speak about is the psychological dimension, something that we tend not to talk about, something that we tend to shy away from, because the last thing that we want to really address is somebody's or an institution's psychological profile. It is important, however, that we do look at what does the unconscious hold? What is something, what are the things that we do consciously? On the unconscious level, there are a whole lot of things that we repress and suppress. And we need to go and sit and reflect a bit and say, what are those things that we don't talk about, either because they're too painful, or they're too embarrassing to deal with, or for survival purposes that we don't want to think about them. The cultural dimension is the next dimension that we need to address. And in the cultural dimension, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand what are those values that underline and underpin our behavior. We need to consciously know what they are. We need to deal with them, and we need to deal with the associated behavior. My two good friends, Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, talk about a culture where you have to have 3 to 6 core values that are held in a cult-like fashion. That means when you come into that organization, you need to be able to feel it. It needs to be tangible. The next dimension, ladies and gents, is the economic dimension. And when we speak of the economic dimension, basically what we're speaking about is, what is this organization about? Here in the Western Cape, when I go to a wine farm, a wine estate, and I ask them, what are you about? They tell me, Johan, we produce grapes, we make wine. That's the economic dimension. What is your economic dimension as it's called? Are you there? Or do you exist to get people through school? And it's something that we'll talk about later. The last dimension that we need to address, ladies and gentlemen, is the political dimension. And the political dimension has to do with what is the style of communication within this organization. How do we exercise power? Is it power over, where it's one, do it because I say so? Or is it power through, where we create an environment within which people feel themselves safe to empower themselves? And this is becoming more and more a very important point. It doesn't mean that democracy means everything goes. It is freedom and empowerment within rules. What we also need to remember, ladies and gents, and we will get to it at a much later stage, is that you can't empower people. People need to empower themselves. But you need to create an environment within which they feel themselves safe to do exactly that. Ladies and gents, in consolidation, in terms of the dimensions, when you look at your school, at the governing body, at the society, at the suburb, you need to understand these 8 dimensions, because they will affect what you're looking at very strongly.